Hi everybody, good morning, good evening, and welcome wherever you're watching us from in the world. My name's Graham Canning. I work for People-Centered Excellence, and it's my pleasure and honour to introduce to you a colleague of mine, Oscar Roche, who is going to talk to us a little bit about a new course that we're running with Oscar called Toyota Kata Online Development Programme for Improvers. And we'll talk a little bit through this short webcast about the power of Toyota Kata and how this course is very unique in terms of the offering that we're bringing to you. So without further ado, hello Oscar, how are you?
Good, Graham, and I bet you're in good form after England's win in the semis this morning.
Absolutely, yeah. So anybody who's watching this a few days after, this is the morning after the night before for all those England fans who have managed to get to their first final in a major soccer competition for something like 55 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, fingers crossed to the final. We don't
about the time when I was born. It was when England, when I was born in Leeds, by the way.
Yeah, so you have a bit of affinity, don't you, to the old mother?
Yeah, and it's funny how I for the first 30 or 40 years of my life, I reckon I had zero, to be honest, and not being rude.
Yeah.
Not meaning to be rude, but it's funny how the affinity is developing just a little in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. I've been back a few times and back to where we had a holiday house up in the Dales, or Mum and Dad did. I don't remember it, up in the Yorkshire Dales, and I've just absolutely loved going up there.
Oh man, yeah,
really loved it.
It's a beautiful part of the world. Yeah. So yeah, and so those people who don't know anything about Oscar, I'm going to ask him to talk a bit about himself and his background. But so where in the world are you, Oscar?
So I'm in a place called Griffith, which is 600, I'll go back to Imperial, about 350 miles west of Sydney and about 300 miles north of Melbourne. So in the state of New South Wales, in the what we would politely term as a lot of people would say I'm in the sticks. Small town of about 30.
Griffith then? What's the population?
About 30,000.
Okay, that's a decent sized town, though, isn't it? It's
It is by our standards. Yeah, it is. It's a heavy Italian population. It's a bit of history. It was settled after the Second World War, and a lot of the Italian migrants that came out here to build our hydro scheme were then resettled here. So there's about 60 to 70% Italian population in Griffith.
Oh wow. Okay. And what's the major sport in that part of the world? Is that rules?
No, no, it's a good question. It's evenly split between Australian rules, rugby league, rugby union, and soccer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean the soccer with the Italian connection. I know that.
Yes, that's right.
The Australian football league is well supported by the sort of the Italian or the Mediterranean immigration that happened sort of 50, 60 years ago. Is a big follower of soccer in Australia, isn't it?
Exactly, and like you say, the Italians certainly make it. It's probably there's more soccer around here than there would be in most country towns in Australia, and that the Italians got a lot to do with that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Great.
So they're all celebrating it as well. So they were.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. They're going to be our adversaries come Sunday evening. Yeah.
Exactly. I was at one of the wineries I work for today, who was owned by an Italian family actually, and they were talking about what they're going to be doing on our Monday morning, and that was their focus. They weren't worried about making wine or anything. They were where they're going to be and where they're going to watch it.
Of course, yeah. Stuff. Monday, it'll be the following day for them. So yeah,
it'll be about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think they said.
Wow. Okay. So anyway, it's great to catch up, but we ought to find out a little bit about yourself, really, in terms of your professional background. Just for a minute or two, just tell us a bit about who you are and your background and your experience, how you arrived to where you are on your journey with Toyota Kata.
So very briefly, well, that'll take a little longer, but very briefly, did a degree in applied science and food tech in the mid-'80s, and I say to people I've never used it. Right. And I'm not a food technologist, but did I use what I learned during that, and did I use the learnings I got through that course? Yeah, I'm sure I have in many ways.
Right.
But then from that, I went in. I was put through a company, and I was a production supervisor for a dairy company, who's actually now owned by Fonterra, who are an international dairy organisation. And then I left them and went up to Queensland and Brisbane and worked as production manager at a pineapple cannery.
Right.
Then worked for a cleaning company called Ecolab, which a lot of people in Britain would have heard of, or the UK would have heard of for sure.
Yeah.
Then I went over to even more in the sticks than here, to a place called Mildura, where I was operations manager in a fruit juice factory. Then came back to Griffith, moved to Griffith, and was with a logistics company for quite some time. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. I was not with them for long at all. Square peg in a round hole, to cut a long story short.
Right.
And I was 35 and didn't have any kids at that stage, financially secure enough to take a bit of a risk, and went out on my own, set myself up on my own, really with a to help companies set up food safety systems and quality management systems.
All right. Okay.
And fell on my feet with that one, particularly around here where it's a bit of a food bowl. Well, it is a food bowl. It's the Australian food bowl. So I was sort of in the right place to do that sort of thing. Then was partner in a cherry packing plant, which was state of the art Southern Hemisphere. And that took me back to operations for a while, for 3 or 4 months of the year. And it was really during that time that I had a friend I went through college with whose name's Ian Haberfield, and he gave me a book called Visual Workplace, Visual Thinking by Dr. Gwen Galsworth, and said that I should read the book. And I don't read many books, and I have taken his advice from time to time. So I read that book and tried a few things out that were in that book and thought, gee, this made a significant difference to me as a manager at the cherry plant. I thought, well, this is far more interesting than food safety systems and quality systems. And why don't I see if I can help companies do this sort of thing? So that's how the visual workplace stuff started.
Yeah.
Then through that, I was handed an article about in 2009 or 10. No, sorry. One of the customers we were working for, they actually make Yellowtail wine, which I think you guys have in England.
Oh, yeah, we know that well. Yes.
So Yellowtail, the winery is about 15 minutes from here, from home.
Okay.
So I was working with them, and the manager there said to me, he said, you guys do quite a good job at the frontline level. We're happy to pay the bills and all that, but you're leaving the middle manager behind, the frontline supervisor. No one in this country has programs for them. And about a month later, I stumbled over an article from the AME in America where it talked about TWI. And I'd never heard of TWI, and I read the article and I thought, wow, there's stuff in here. There's stuff in here that I spoke to that operations manager at the Yellowtail Winery about. So I contacted the institute over in America, and one thing led to another, and they come over here, and we're now part of the institute, as you can see. And then through that work, I was doing work in Vietnam through the same guy who was then a factory manager in Vietnam, who told me about visual workplace, visual thinking, that book. And I turned up there about the fourth or fifth trip, and he handed me a book, and he said, Oscar, you're very, very good at what you do. You're a very, very good project planner. But he said, there's one thing you're missing. He said, you need to read this book. And that book was called Toyota Kata.
Right. Okay.
And I read the book. I started to read the book, and there's a line in the book that says no plan should cover, or no plan needs to cover everything, and that is okay. And I read that line. I thought, well, that's got to be bullshit, because I have not operated that way.
Yeah.
So that's not the way I operate.
Yeah, I think that there's some shared experience here. There was a number of people here who felt challenged by some of the stuff in that book. Like,
absolutely, and I was one of them. Number one.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm joining that. If we're going to self-declare, I was like, there's nothing for me in this. Yeah, the first time I read it, I've got this. I know if I go into an organization as a consultant, I know where I'm taking them. It's my job to take them to this destination.
That's correct.
That completely challenged me with Toyota Kata.
Yep, exactly. But the good thing was I kept reading, and then the penny dropped. It started to drop. And the penny that dropped was that I'm always going to be left-brained, and I'm always going to be that way. And that if I try and alter that, it's probably not going to be a smart move, because I won't enjoy life, because I am left-brained.
Right.
But what I realized was that rather than using the left brain to develop a project, I used the left brain to practice a pattern. apply the same rigor to the pattern to practicing the pattern as I did to the project, then I'm still using my left brain, which is natural to me, but I'm using it in a different way. I thought, wow, I wonder if that's what I've got to do. So that's what I started to try, and I've never looked back. It changed the way I think. It changed the way I function fundamentally.
Yeah, I love
but
that.
I'm still left-brained.
Yeah, because we're not talking with this about, this isn't a free-for-all. This isn't random.
No.
This isn't we're just going to try and sort of stab in the dark. There's a pattern. There's a thinking.
An absolute pattern. And I was able to take the rigor that I applied to project plans and not deviating from the project plan, even when I should. I was able to take that rigor and apply it to practicing a pattern, and the pattern then took me where it needed to be, where I needed to be, when I needed to be there.
So so we've talked a bit about Toyota Kata, of course. We're both huge fans of the approach. We try and apply it in the way that we do pretty much all of our work these days, I guess. But why do you think it's so important
and not
right
work
now?
and not work? Like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've going through COVID too. My son's got to go back to boarding school in Melbourne on Monday, and they've just thrown a spanner in the works. It's not a complicated thing, but because of an outbreak in Sydney, he's got to have a COVID test before he can get back to school. But he's got to have it in a different state. So the logistics are not straightforward. It's not a matter of just getting it done.
Yes.
But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what's the condition I've got to aim for? What are the obstacles? Which one am I going to work on first? And let's get around that. So that's the way I function now.
So that thinking pattern has become the way that you think about facing up to problems and challenges outside of work. It's just the way you think.
Just the way I think.
Yeah.
And I'm continuing to learn and get better at it. And look, when the pressure really comes on, I tend to I will revert back. But what I'm realizing now is I'm realizing when I'm reverting back.
Yes.
And that allows me to work on not doing that next time. So I'm certainly not perfect, but I'm becoming very aware when I revert back to the old ways.
Yeah. Do you know what? I start to think of it as somebody throwing you the old life ring, the rub, if you're in that kind of choppy water of like, where are we with this? Actually, the structure is that thing that people throw you that you can hold on to get you through that. And sometimes you have to kind of remind yourself of that, but that's how it works for me in terms of saying, that's my structure to be calm about this and think about, okay, so what's the obstacle that I want to work on first?
Yes, exactly.
Rather than be overwhelmed by, there's just so much going on here, I just don't know where to start.
I remember in my early days, Mike Rother put up a picture of that. When you're at the airport and you're transferring on a bus from plane A to plane B or whatever.
Yeah.
Half the time you have to stand up, and certainly out here in the smaller airports, and they have that handle that you hold onto in the bus.
Yes.
The grip handle.
Yeah.
Well, he put a picture of that up. I remember him doing it and saying, this is the patterns are like this handle on the bus. They give you stability in unclear space. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Didn't understand what he was saying until about a year later, and I suddenly thought, shit, now I understand what he's getting at. And we use that picture a lot.
I love that.
Now I understand it. I use that picture a lot. Same thing as what you were saying.
Yeah, just that bit of structure and stability to latch onto. It has a really calming influence, doesn't it? And I know that when I've talked to lots of people who've been navigating through the challenges of COVID and the kind of uncertain times. Do you think that Toyota Kata is, do you think that the time is right? I mean, we're going to say yes, of course. Obviously it's a leading question, but why do you think that the time is right for Toyota Kata now then, Oscar?
Well, I'll just share the screen and I'll put up a slide that I use to answer that question. I think it's answered there on the left, because right now we are less sure than ever of what the future looks like in the business world and overall. And I think as time goes on, we're going to become less and less sure than ever of what the future looks like. Then therefore what's on the right will apply. So the most success is going to come to those who are best at innovating and adapting. So, 30 or 40 years ago, when the future was much more predictable, projects plans as such were probably more effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're becoming less and less effective, because in the life of a typical project plan for for continuous improvement or whatever it may be, where we're talking maybe 12, 18 months, 2 years. Well, the landscape changes a lot in that time. I mean, I'm sure what's happened in the last 18 months hopefully won't keep happening for the next 10 years. But I think it's a good example of what can happen, and what we need to be prepared for, and what we need to be able to cope with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's the challenge as well, going back to what we were saying about people who have a template. So, and I come from that heritage myself as a lean consultant, to go, yeah, I have a program for you here, which fits the development of what kind of Toyota have done over the previous 40 years. And I'm going to kind of overlay that to you, and that's your future.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge to that, isn't it? To say, well, with all this degree of uncertainty, how do we know that that's the right answer?
Absolutely. And also what I've become sort of really conscious of is, we talk about our knowledge threshold, and when we go beyond our knowledge threshold, essentially, whenever you take what's worked before to a new group of people, then you're going beyond your knowledge threshold, because it's worked before with group A.
Yes.
It's worked before with Group A, but
Yeah.
you should not assume that what worked before with Group A is going to work with Group B.
Yeah.
In other words, you are beyond your knowledge threshold,
Yes.
because you've never been there with Group B before.
Yes.
Therefore, the only way forward is to experiment.
Well, you get into some fascinating things around biases and assumptions, doesn't it? We assume that if it
Oh,
worked before, it's going to work again.
yeah.
And somebody said,
And
I don't know whether it's your quote or somebody talks about you never step in the same river twice.
that's not mine, no.
It's a
But
good one, though.
yes,
You should claim it.
it's a good one. Yeah, no, it's a good, and it's really, as Mike Rother says, he's not a brain scientist, and I certainly don't profess to be anything near it. But what I've found, I wish, I don't know if I would have recognised it, but even if I could recognise 20 or 30 years ago the influence that even the biases I had formed then, if I could recognise the problems that my biases caused, that's one thing I would love to change, because they didn't cause drama, but they caused me to get the biases caused me to go down the wrong track.
Yeah.
And they are really hard to see.
They are.
They are really hard to
They're
see.
probably harder within yourself, aren't they, than seeing them in other
Absolutely.
people? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to see when you've jumped to a conclusion, and yeah, very hard to see. And it fascinates me now, the degree to which I see myself doing it, but also other people. They say this and this happened.
Yes.
And I said, no, it didn't. Someone else has told you. The fact is that Billy told you this and this happened. Whether it happened or not, we don't know.
Yeah, but you took it.
But there's a bias there to say, well, previous experience, Billy was right, so I'll believe what Billy says this time as well.
Mike's running a fascinating little experiment with people who are volunteering to see how many times in a day was your assumption wrong.
Yeah.
And people are recording 30, 40, 50 times a day when they assumed something that turned out to be not the case.
Yeah. But it's interesting what I sort of what I now understand through that it's a natural, we shouldn't blame ourselves for that. It's a natural survival mechanism that we do that. So it's not a case of blame or self-deprecate because, I follow my biases all the time, but it's part of that discipline or the self-discipline of using these patterns to try and decrease the risk of continually following your biases.
It is. It's an evolutionary trait that actually what we're trying to do
absolutely.
with scientific thinking is we're trying to put that framework in place to allow us not to lapse into that, I guess.
Yes. But there'll be times when it's not to say that you completely forget that, because there's going to be times in the reality of life. I saw about 2 years ago, I was walking the dog up the hill in the middle of summer, and the dog came across a brown snake, which is highly venomous. And the snake reared up to have a crack at the dog. And before I knew what I was doing, I'd picked up a rock and yelled at the dog and thrown a stone at the snake. And so I couldn't afford then to think scientifically.
No. Yeah, I need to do some process analysis here to really understand the current condition.
Yeah, I couldn't afford
No,
that.
I just need to pick up. Yeah.
I had to act on a bias. The brown snake's dangerous. Act immediately.
Yes. And this is that that intuitive programming of fight or flight. I've got to
That's
make.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I
But
mean,
the Toyota Kata is about, in some ways, it's about practicing when to switch that off.
yes. Yeah. And not use that
Perhaps.
as the default for everything.
Yes, and
But
not use
yeah.
that as the
Yeah.
default. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
Um, Now, moving on to the course then, because
Yes.
we're trying something quite different here, aren't we? Quite innovative, in my view, anyway. But what do you think
Yes.
makes the course that we're offering together so different?
Well, certainly in the first part, where it's about the two workshops, what I say to others that have had a crack at it is it's about I'm your legs and arms and legs.
Yes.
So I'm going to get you to follow a pattern. It doesn't matter where you're sitting. You're going to be following a pattern, and I'm going to set the target condition that you tell me to set with a bit of guidance from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to write down the obstacles that you identify with guidance from me.
Right.
I'm going to write up whatever experiment, and I'm going to do whatever experiment you tell me to do. And you're going to watch me do it and study it and evaluate it and guide me on what I'm going to do next. So essentially, I think one of the things that sets this apart is that for the people who are participating, I know that they're not in the same room, but I become their arms and legs and their guide in terms of following the improvement Kata pattern.
Yeah. So
and then in terms of what your role is, as a mentor and coach, then they're going to step into the real world.
yes.
They're going to be in a virtual world for a while with me, and then they're going to step into the real world with you.
Yeah. So I think it's a great kind of three-phased. We're going to give people some awareness and knowledge of Toyota Kata, and in particular the improvement Kata, aren't we, in terms of how they can start using those thinking patterns. Then we're going to give them the initial practice that you talked about in a simulated environment where you are. It's kind of as close to virtual as we can get on the budget that we've got in terms of, they are shaping what you do, and you're going to kind of almost robotically follow what they tell you to do as their experiments. Correct. And they're going to learn through repeating cycles, of experimentation, whether their hypothesis is right, what they're going to learn from it, and they're going to get some grounding in the improvement Kata through doing that. And then we're going to get them to do it for real with my support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Okay.
So it's a stepped approach, a bit of knowledge, like you said, a stepped approach, knowledge, practice in a relatively safe environment, and then start practicing still in a safe way, but in more of a real way, in their own world, with their own stuff.
Why is practice so important, Oscar?
Why is practice so important? Because models, to quote Mike Rother, models alone do not change behaviour. Now, that is something I wish someone had told me 30 years ago, that models alone will not change people's behaviour. No matter how good it is, you can have the best model in the world, and I'm quoting Mike now, you can have the best model in the world presented by the best professor with the best PowerPoint and the best auditorium, but it won't change people's behaviour.
No. And again, what a harsh learning that has been for some of us. I just pride myself on my ability to train people in classroom environments, and I just assume that they're going to step up from there. They're going to take it forward, and they're just going to do it without practice.
Yeah, and that's what me too. That's what I thought. So the one thing that I wish I'd realised 30 years ago was that models alone, if I was to pick one thing, I wish I'd realised is that models alone won't change behaviour. The only way to change behaviour and go from, you're going to go from comfortable to uncomfortable back to comfortable. The only way to do that is practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, as with anything. I mean, I've got these guitars next to me, and I've kind of been somebody who's tried to learn guitar for many years, but used Kata recently to help me do that. It is uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Practice is uncomfortable. That feeling of being beyond your threshold of knowledge and beyond your comfort zone, that's where you are learning. So it's supposed to feel uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah.
So and one of the things I've sort of awoken to with that is actually what the feeling that you're looking for. If you're feeling a tad uncomfortable, then that's what you're actually looking for. That's saying you're probably on the right track.
Right. Yeah. Be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
But again, that's a skill to practice. That level of anxiety. It's like, it's okay. This is where we're learning. if you're staying in that situation of comfort, you're within the threshold of knowledge. You already know the
Exactly.
answer. So
That's right. That's
why
right.
are we're focusing this specifically on the improvement kata rather than the coaching kata. Why is that a good thing in your view? Why can't people just jump in and coach straight away?
Because it's like football. You know, you've got to know the fundamentals and be capable of the fundamentals before you can teach someone else, essentially. And I think it's of the Toyota Kata practice guide. I think it's page 42, where it says, you know, there's a model. If you've got it in front of you, have a look. I think it's page 42, if I remember rightly. There's a model that says awareness, practice the improvement kata, start coaching.
Yep, it's right there, and we've
That's
used
the one,
that.
top right.
Yeah. So we've used that image on the website as well to the course, so you can see that there too, with Mike's permission, of course.
Yeah, but it stands to reason that you're not going to start. You're going to be in a much better position to help someone else learn something if you can first do it yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to be the best at it.
Right.
Far from it. I mean, the best coaches are not the best swimmers necessarily, and the best football coaches weren't necessarily the best players.
Yes.
I mean, Ash Barty, by the way, who's about to win Wimbledon.
We'll see. Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, let's hope she does. There's been a lot of interest lately over here about her, one of her coaches, in terms of the mental side of it, and he's never played. He's rarely played tennis.
Yes.
But he's helped us. She says he's helped us significantly. But he has to have some skill. And the point being is he has to have some skill there.
Yes.
To be able to relate and put it into context.
I think it's really.
But he doesn't have to be the best tennis player in the world.
Yeah, I think there is really there's a tendency for people to want to rush to coach as well with kata, in my experience. But they probably find that when they do that, they realize that actually their experience and knowledge of the improvement kata isn't as good as it can be for them to be an effective coach to a different improver.
Yes.
So if you're going to add value as a coach, you need to have had the experience of being an improver first. That's my view anyway, for what it's worth.
Exactly.
That's great. So time's moving on. I wanted to just talk a little bit about what we think delegates will get from this course, because obviously part of this is to promote the fact that we're doing this come September. And what do we think delegates will get out of this? So
delegates are going to get the skill. They're going to a couple of things. One is they'll be able to, at the end of it, they will have the skill of being able to do the improvement kata on their own. The second thing, and that's, I mean, some will be able to do it completely on their own. Some may still need some follow-up and assistance, but they can always get that. But they'll know enough to be able to venture into their own world and apply the improvement kata patterns on their own. That's the main thing they're going to get. So they've got the freedom to go forward without anybody looking over their shoulders. Yes, and I think that's a life skill, as we talked about earlier. You know, understanding that pattern of thinking is something that then they can take away and practice. Yeah, and that can be practiced internally without anyone else knowing. I mean, we've got organizations that we work for, and they don't even know of the word improvement kata. But is that the way we're facilitating our work with them? Absolutely, it is. Yes. So you can practice it surreptitiously. It doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't have to be overt. It can be it can be done quite surreptitiously, and not in a cunning way, but you can use it in a not obvious way. And we do that in many organizations. People will say, oh, you know, give us a Toyota Kata case study or an improvement kata case study. And sometimes I struggle with that as the honest answer, because to be specific and say, here it is, and here's the goal, and here's the storyboard, and here's this, and here's that, I can't do it. But that's because we're going beyond that, and we're thinking scientific. You know, through practicing the improvement kata surreptitiously, we're thinking scientifically. Yeah, I've heard it referred to as kata by stealth. Not even calling it kata, but it's actually a thinking pattern that supports everything. And actually, that's right. If you've worked at Toyota like I did for a little bit, or you've studied Toyota, you don't see it manifest itself as actually we did this through thinking scientifically or through the application of the improvement kata.
It's just a way of thinking that they overlay onto everything, really.
Yes. So if, to answer your question, if people commit and do what we expect of them during this program, they'll be capable of going out on their own and having a crack.
Yeah, and
with others.
My bit is I want them to bring a real issue, a real challenge to the training. We're not going to just simulate that bit. Bring a real challenge to the table, and let's work through situation. Let's use a real challenge to establish, okay, what is the challenge? What's the target condition? What's our initial condition? What do we need to do to understand the current situation? Let's do that for real. And who knows, stepping through one or two target conditions there, we're going to start seeing some improvement. We're going to start seeing a greater understanding of what the issue is and where we're going. So it's an opportunity to actually work on something.
That's right. That's the second, just to be clear on that, that's the secondary benefit.
Yeah.
The secondary benefit is a benefit to the organisation, to be blunt. That is a secondary benefit, but the primary benefit we're looking for is this capability, because if we can build that, then you can take it on and on and on.
Absolutely.
Rather than just a once-off flash in the pan.
Who do you think, who's it suitable for? What kind of people, what kind of roles, organisations would get benefit from this?
Yeah, so anyone I was going to say anyone in a leadership position, but that doesn't have to be formal. Like you'll get senior operators who are what I would call senior operators who are natural leaders.
Yes.
Who have, and therefore when I say that, they have influence over others and they're respected over others. They have influence over others, others respect them. Yes. So anyone in that role or who is in an official leadership position on an operational level would certainly benefit from this. But even at non-operational, admin type organizations, we're just starting work. We're continuing work with the police force down in Victoria at the moment in Melbourne. So they've done the simulation with us, and now they're doing the trainer so they can capture it, so they can have the capability of what I do internally. So that's in an organisation that's not manufacturing. They're applying it to keeping the law, and the forensics department is involved in that exercise. So it's not only manufacturing people and leadership roles; it's anyone in an improvement role in a leadership role in any organisation.
I'm working with some people in financial services myself who are applying Toyota Kata thinking incredibly successfully in terms of tackling their customer service issues that they've got right now and reducing their lead time for their process to get better customer satisfaction. Doing a great job with applying Toyota Kata to that issue. So it doesn't have to be manufacturing people. What about people who are in the kind of continuous improvement and lean world, if they're up for the challenge?
Yes, just that last bit's important. If they're up for the challenge. So what I had to do, what I've found there is they've got to be able to let go or willing to let go of preconceived ideas.
Yes.
So willing to let go of the template.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's, in some ways, that's our toughest audience.
But there's plenty out there, but that is a prerequisite, and I'll be pretty blunt on that, is they've got to be willing to, as I found I had to be willing to let go of the template.
Yes, absolutely.
But the upside of that is of letting go with it. The template was the answer. Yeah. So when the template was wrong, who got the blame?
Yeah.
So what I've found actually is it's quite liberating, because and I mean this quite seriously. It's been completely liberating, because no longer do I need to provide the template anymore. I just need to help people follow the pattern, and the pattern will find the way. Will help them find the way, whatever way that may be. Yes. The way to the conditions we're going to target, the way to the goals. Yeah. Rather than drawing a plan and risking being wrong, we don't. No, we're just going to follow a pattern.
I think
it's completely liberating.
It is, and it's so exciting. I mean, it needs to be pitched in a very different way. So there's a bit of a trust element and an act of faith, isn't it, in the view of the client to go, what do you mean?
Yes.
What do you mean you can't tell me what the answer is going to be?
Yep.
You've had a look around, you've kicked the tires on this organization. What's the answer? It's like, no, we need to work with your team to actually develop that. We don't know. I don't know. So yeah, it's a very different pitch than might have been used in the past. But ultimately, what that is developing is answers that are right for that organization, answers that meet their specific challenges, not copying somebody else's template.
Yes, that ultimately probably won't stick. The data shows that 90% of the time it doesn't stick.
The road is littered with these failed initiatives. So why not try this? Moving on to the course then. So we're going to put this out. The website link will be available to the course itself. It kicks off 21st of September, I think, Oscar. Is that right?
I haven't got my calendar
open.
No,
that's okay. I've got it here in front of me.
That's the date I put it in.
Yeah, so
that's the date you told me. That's the date I put in.
Yeah, we're breaking this down into 3 stages, as we've alluded to. So we have a bit of a kickoff session, 21st of September, and then we give the delegates a little bit of self-study to do, and give time for people to become familiar with the concepts in their own time, start thinking about how this might apply in their organizations. Then stage 2 is the mini simulation exercise that's we mentioned before, where Oscar is our arms and legs in terms of, we'll be doing this virtually. He'll be in New South Wales. We'll be wherever we are in the world, and practicing the improvement kata patterns to meet a specific challenge in that environment. And then stage 3 is kind of like where I kind of take over a little bit, and I work specifically with the teams around the stages of the improvement kata, the 4 stages of setting the challenge, understanding the current condition, setting a target condition, and then experimenting towards that target condition. And we do that over a period of the following 4 weeks, two drop-in sessions a week. Now, ideally, if we could coach you every day, we would try and do that. But realistically for this, we're aiming to do that twice a week. So over 6 weeks, that's what the program looks like. So it runs from the 21st of September to towards the end of October. I think potentially the 28th of October is the last slot. So, so if I was thinking about joining this course, Oscar, but I wasn't sure about whether this was for me, what would you say to encourage me to take the next step?
I would say that I can't promise you an outcome. I can't promise you what the outcome will be, sorry. I can't promise you specifically what the outcome will be, but I can promise you an outcome, and that outcome is you will learn something. I can't tell you what that's going to be because that'll vary from person to person, but you are going to learn something that will, and the context in which you learn it will, and what you learn will something that will help you for the rest of your life if you're prepared to work on it.
Well, I think that's
during the program and beyond.
I think that's a pretty good offer, and I hope that.
But it's not a silver bullet.
No, it's not, and it's not going to be something that you can just take and leave. You need to take it and practice. Yeah,
correct. But you will be rewarded if you do.
And I think that truly transformational thing that you just said about it might just change your life.
Yeah.
So why not come along and see what it's all about?
Certainly did me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Oscar, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
It's been a delight. And we could talk for hours, and I know we've had chats in the past, and it's always really fascinating to get your insight. So thank you very much for your time.
Likewise.
This evening for you, this morning for me, and hopefully people will be inspired by this to check out what we're doing. We'll put the details along with these video clips, so people can take a look at the course, and hopefully you'll join us in September. So excellent. Thanks everybody.
Great. I'd like that.
See you soon.
And also one other thing, Graham.
Sure.
Good luck on Sunday. The soccer. As long as I'll barrack for England, if you barrack for Ash Barty, if she makes the final, the ladies final.
We had a flash of inspiration with a new 18-year-old girl superstar, Emma Raducanu, who everybody's really excited about the prospects of her in the future. So, but I think our British interest has come to an end. So Yeah, I'll root for Ash. No problem at all.
It's a
Yeah,
deal.
so.
Good on you. It's a deal.
Thanks, Oscar.
Okay. Thanks, Graham.